All right. So today we're looking at we got chapter 3 today. So this is going to be the psychological considerations for youth. This is another pretty quick one. We're kind of this class really kind of eases in. So we'll get this PowerPoint knocked out, and then you guys can find homework number 2 up on Canvas. And then tomorrow we'll get into like fitness assessment. So now tomorrow we'll like really dive into like the program design aspects of this program design class, right? Like know a little bit about like assessments and how they affect like change and what exercises are appropriate for what people and things like that. So, but first we kind of need to understand like if we are going to be working with youths, right, teens and children and things like that, we need to make sure that like we understand a little bit about like the psychological implications of exercise, because exercise is meant to be a very positive thing, but sometimes it can be a negative thing. So we got to break down sort of how the mind and body are all sort of connected here. So that's what we'll be looking at today. Let's put that there and take a look here. So psychological considerations, obviously a big part of how to train our youth clients, right? We do know that it's sort of a common misconception. Like a lot of people think that, your mind is your mind and your body is your body, but we definitely know that there's like a connection there. Like a healthy body, sort of helps have like a healthy mind and vice versa, like I know that like even like just from my perspective, like every now and then when like if I throw my back out or something and like I start having like really bad back pain, I'll like I won't clean my room as much, and like I'll be frustrated and short with my friends. It's funny. It's like how connected like just like a little aches and pains can kind of create and things like that. And so today when we're talking about kids, we want to understand how that influence psychologically has like over their quality of life, like how to improve that, which is fun because we just got done talking about like an entire psychology class. We're just going to sort of look at it from a much smaller perspective. We'll also understand how like self-perception is a really big part of like why we want to get kids engaged in exercise. That is super, super important. We want to make sure that like youths are engaging in some type of physical activity because of how good it really is for your brain. And we'll also talk about like the 5 key traits for high achievers, which is kind of fun because that's something we haven't looked at all. In fact, that's like this is the only place you're going to find that in NASM's materials. So that'll be kind of fun here in just a little bit. But as we're looking at it, right, what we really do want to come up with in the end is like strategies to understand our clients' like visions and goals, which is a little hard for youths to sometimes like articulate. Sometimes they're gonna have a little bit of a hard time being like, my vision for my life is this. I have these. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And it's like, oh, like, that's not super easy for a lot of youths. But it doesn't mean that we can't break that down into like goals that we can sort of translate into our own language that also still fits them. So the first thing we're going to look at before we kind of get towards like the goals and anything like that, we do need to understand this kind of key concept right here at the top, which is like the mind and body are not separate, right? We've already kind of talked about it just for a little bit, but like we understand like but the mind is like whenever we're talking about something that is psychological or anything that is like emotional, right? And then the body is anything that we're bringing up like physiologically or anatomically, right? And so those sound very like separate, but if a psychological is how an individual thinks about something and emotional is how an individual feels about something, both of those things can have effects on their body, how it physically works or how it anatomically physically feels, right? And so like both of those things are definitely like connected. Like I said, like I know that like when I'm having aches and pains, like everything in the world is worse. Like everything is just like even just like sometimes after like a sore workout, like, you'll wake up and just be like, I really don't want to get out of bed today. And it's like I could just sleep. I could just stay asleep, and that's like it's such a clear sign of like kind of giving up and stuff. But at the same time, like there's other times where like I'll get like a really great workout in and I'll leave the gym and feel like super awesome and excited and enthusiastic for the rest of the day. And like if we can create like those kind of positive changes early on in our youths, like they're more likely to, again, be healthier, happier adults, right? That's really what the whole purpose of all of this is. Um, I think I might have like over exaggerated a little bit. I was a little hyperbolic when I said that like our goal is not to train like the world's fastest, strongest youth or anything like that. Who knows? You might end up being like a coach, and your goal is to like create like a super youth athlete, right? That is still a worthy goal, but oftentimes like the most common thing that we're really just spending our time doing is just getting our youth set up for success in adulthood, creating like these healthy like mind body habits. And so we know that the mind influences the body, and the body is going to influence the mind. A lot of times when you're seeing this, when it comes to like someone's like psychological well-being, you're seeing like a lot of issues in youths where like girls don't feel fit because they don't like the way they look. We'll see boys who sometimes like, an example is like they can't run faster than their teammates, or maybe they can't lift as much, or maybe they're not as strong looking as they're supposed to. And so like we're going to see like, among both sexes, like some pretty common, sort of like through lines here. And it's difficult because you can't just be like, it's difficult to explain to a youth that like these things are temporary, and that they have a lot of like choice over things, and that they can like work towards like, reaching specific goals that are going to make them feel better. Those like intangible emotional and psychological things are just really hard to hold on to, like they're very difficult to kind of grasp. And at the same time, like it's also very difficult to forecast in the future for youths, right? Like they have a really hard time like seeing further into the future, and like, being like, hey, well, if this is what things are now, like imagine what it's going to be like, this way. Like if you put in this hard work and you're going to get this in return, right? Like that can sometimes be challenging. And so again, like the biggest thing that we can do sort of in the beginning is just try to be empathetic. And this, I will say, like, is something that I always had like a lot of success with when I was working with like teenagers and stuff. Just having the ability to be like, oh man, I've totally been through something like that. That is super frustrating. I know how you feel. That's really what sort of like really resonates with like a lot of like youths, is empathy. So, and again, kind of going back, like we know that sympathy is feeling bad for someone. Empathy is sort of feeling what they're going through, right? Like identifying with what it is they're struggling with. And so the more often we can be empathetic, the better. So here's sort of how we're seeing this whole thing lay out. Now, I actually remember that I've got kind of a red flag homework question for you guys. So I'm going to give you the tip right now, because I've definitely had this one come up before. Quality of life, and I think it's just because it's not like written directly here in the slides. It is in the reading. It's there's a definition in the reading, but your quality of life is comprised of your psychological well-being, your emotional well-being, physical well-being, and social well-being. So if we're looking at all four of those concepts, like those four things are what lead to a positive quality of life, right? We want you to psychologically think well. We want you to physically feel well. We want you to have an active, a healthy social life. I don't necessarily I shouldn't just say like an active social life, because that kind of conjures up images of being like, woo, and, going out crazy. That is not what we need. What we need is a healthy social life, right? We want to have like supportive people around us and things like that. And then your emotional well-being is part of that as well, right? Like emotionally, we want you to feel in healthy ways, rather than like these intense all or nothing ways, which is pretty common, right? So we don't really want to see that kind of thing. So looking at these, right, looking at our what we're talking about here, right? Your psychological well-being focuses on healthy thoughts. Your emotional well-being focuses on healthy emotions. Social well-being, healthy relationships, and physical well-being, a healthy physical life. The social one's so funny to me. Like this is the one that I think a lot of times people really do struggle with. At least we see it commonly, right? Like you'll have somebody who is just so successful, and they're healthy, and they do all these things. They take really good care of themselves, and then they're just constantly stressed out by this one other person in their life. And it's like, man, like that relationship is killing you. And it's just like, it's just a struggle there. And so like, sometimes the tool is just to learn how to like communicate better, but that is sort of what we're seeing, the four sort of key pillars of an overall improved quality of life, which is really our goal, right? Um, at the end of the day, and this is a sentence that will come back in a later program design class, but at the end of the day, the number one reason that people come to the gym, no matter if they say they're here to lose weight or if they are here to get fit or anything like that, the number one reason that people are going to the gym is to improve their quality of life. So we understand the four sort of key components of that improved quality of life. Maybe it is just straight up physically, and they are here just to feel better physically, right? But this is where, again, like behavior change and nutrition and all these different things sort of all come together. So some of the key components of like quality of life as well are going to be things like your self-perception. So this is where you've got sort of two main sections here, right? So you have got self-perception, which can have a really, really severe impact on things, right? And it's how an individual actually sees themselves. So like individuals are going to see themselves in sort of two main categories, right? They're going to see themselves as as efficient at being able to accomplish tasks, right? I forgot the word efficient because I'm staring at efficacy. They're gonna feel that they can accomplish tasks in like a timely manner or like an effective manner or whatever, right? And then they're gonna have like their self-esteem, which is gonna be like how they see themselves as like a valuable person. That one's a little harder to like kind of wrap your head around and like understand, but there's two like sort of things that often go into like people's values, especially for youths in particular, which is just like their body competence, which is like how well they can like, control their own body, and their body image, like, which is just how they see themselves, right? Which is kind of interesting because it's like, wait a minute. Self-perception is how you see yourself, and then body image is how you see yourself. Yeah, self-perception is how you see yourself as like a being. Your body image is how you see like how you physically look. So that is also like kind of a challenging definition there. I'll give you a fair warning up top. The homework, this first homework and the psychological one, sometimes none of them are actually trick questions. That's the biggest hint that I can give you, but they sometimes feel like trick questions, which I think NASM does a lot. People are like, oh, they got to be, there's too many B's in a row. That is never a thing. It is random. Who knows? Someday you might. I've always been tempted to. Sorry, I'm tangenting. I've always been tempted to make an entire homework all one letter just to prove a point. But I don't move them around. I try to like leave it as natural as possible, so that would go against my values. But like, oh, it's so tempting. So yeah, these four concepts sometimes get a little like tied up. But let's work our way through them, right? So self-perception obviously has a really big quality of life, right? Or impact on your quality of life. And it's made up of these two main concepts, self-esteem and self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is an individual's confidence that they can accomplish something, right? So like if you were to, take me out to the park or something and like, say like, hey, I'm going to throw a bunch of frisbees at you. My self-efficacy would be like, oh, okay, great. Like I'm very good at that. That's something that I do frequently and have a lot of experience with and have practiced, right? Like why do I have so much confidence doing it? Because I've done it a bunch, right? Like, not for any other reason, not because like, my brain is just naturally be like, I'm good at most things. I think everybody like struggles with certain things. Like I've never jumped out of a plane before. So like, I have to, I have to have like efficacy in someone else's ability, right? Like I have to have belief in someone else's, like I don't have self-efficacy. I have to have a belief in like the dude strapped to your back, and I plan on doing it someday. Like that's something that I definitely want to do. I did bungee jumping last year.
Must do. Skydiving, you must do.
Is it a blast?
It's awesome.
Oh.
It's awesome.
There's no better time. Just do it during the quarantine. Like, it's not Like you're gonna get germs up there in the sky. um, yeah, I did bungee jumping, and I will say, like self-efficacy wise, it's really interesting. It's a very interesting experience because the way it works is like you have to like get strapped in. You go to bungee school for like a half hour where they just basically explain, we're gonna shove you off this thing and you're gonna be tied to a harness. Like, that's honestly about as basic as it is. Obviously there's more to it, but like it's interesting because like it's a very interesting moment for self-efficacy because like you have this harness that you are totally attached to. So even if you were to like fall off the bridge at some point, you'd be okay. You're probably gonna get like tangled up. You might like sprain an ankle or something. Like the worst thing that could happen is that like the harness, like you get a little whiplash because you can go at the right angle. But it still feels very interesting because like, there's the railing to this bridge, and you you step over the railing, and your brain goes, we've spent the last 30 years actively not stepping over. Like the purpose of railings is to keep this situation from happening, like, so your belief that like you are safe just plummets. Like you don't have this belief that you're safe. You feel very unsafe. And that's like an example of like low efficacy. So when you have this like you have to have this like you have to develop this belief in your head, if you're going to jump, which they kind of help you do, by just like hearing everything out ahead of time. And so like the dude explaining it was like, yeah, so the average person here probably weighs like 200 pounds, right? And you're like, yeah. And he's like, let's say somebody weighed 500 pounds. And we are like, all right. And they jumped off this bridge. So this bungee cord is rated to, and he's like, here's the math. And he brings out this thing and he's like, so they're going to fall this many feet. And with terminal velocity being what it is, it's like, this is how many like pounds of force are going to hit. And it's like, wow, that's really cool. And like he kind of maths it out for you. And it's like, so a 500-pound person's going to hit this bungee cord and it's going to apply, and we're going to make up a number, say 2,500 pounds of force. And it's like, this individual cord right here is 2,500 pounds worth of force, and it's attached to these other 60 cords. And we're like, whoa, like, and so you hear it and you're like, okay, like this is pretty safe actually. And so then like you start to develop like belief in being able to accomplish this task without dying. With kids, the stakes are not so high, right? Like with kids, it's like, do you have the belief that you can accomplish this free throw? But even though the stakes are not high, they feel very high. And that's what like a lot of like anxiety comes from. Like that's where like a lot of youths have these beliefs that they can't accomplish something. And we've all like totally seen that happen. I'm sure we've all done it to ourselves. You've maybe psyched yourself out that you can't do something that you've done a million times before, right? That's a lack of self-efficacy, right? And so it's sometimes a hard concept to sort of wrap your head around, but it's your comfort level, right? That's part of it. Like, we want to, in order to enhance the self-efficacy of our youths, right? If we're trying to like improve quality of life and we want to enhance efficacy, we need to build up our youth's confidence with activities that they enjoy and that they can accomplish effectively, right? And so your confidence is going to build the more often you like successfully do something until eventually it becomes routine, and that's actually where like it's funny. Eventually you get to this place where like it's on the opposite side. Like there are times where I'm playing frisbee and I'll go for a play and like reach out to grab the disc and I won't even like look at it anymore and like try to grab it and then get set up till I can do like a throw, and I'll miss it because of course I'm not looking at it. And I do the same thing every time where I go, man, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Like I can't believe that happened. Like I have so much efficacy, I'm shocked that I didn't do it. You know what I mean? Like, and that's kind of like where we want to get our youths to, right? A place where like they feel so comfortable and like positive about like being able to accomplish certain tasks that it has like a really, really, really positive effect on, again, their quality of life, right? They're going to see themselves, their self-perception is going to be as this efficient, effective person. Now, self-esteem is a little bit different. This is your feelings of self-worth, or like it's the belief that as an individual that they have value, right? The belief that like their feelings are important, the belief that their opinions matter, right? Like that's your self-esteem. And this one is, if self-efficacy is already a little intangible, but self-esteem is almost very intangible. It's sometimes really hard to wrap your head around. But like it's the belief that like, even if like let's say you have like some type of fringe opinion, you may understand that it's a fringe opinion, like you can have that understanding and be like, yeah, I know most people don't feel this way, but I feel this way. And what should come along with that is also a feeling of like, and I'm allowed to have that opinion because I have that right. I'm like unique, and I have esteem, and I'm valuable, and I should be allowed to feel this way, right? Whereas some people are like, I have a different opinion, but I don't matter, so I'm gonna go with everybody else's opinion. Like that's often where we end up. That's low self-esteem, right? The feeling that that they don't deserve certain things. Or this is where, like, man, I can't say how many times I've known people. You often hear about people who are afraid of failure, but I feel like people with low self-esteem are the ones who are afraid of success, right? Like, man, this is just so common. It's like, um, well, I could do this. And it's like, well, why don't you? And it's like, I don't know. And it's like, I know. You have like the reason is you don't feel like you deserve it, which is totally irrational, right? Like that's totally like an irrational thought that we need to kind of help our clients come to. Now, self-esteem is not, this is one of the tough things that I think is really, I think this is one of the reasons why this self-esteem stuff sometimes gets messed up in definitions when it comes to homeworks. But self-esteem is not only made up of these two things, but it's the only two that we spend a bunch of time talking about. So there are a lot of things that go into self-esteem. Self-esteem, again, is just your feelings of self-worth. The two sections that, like, if we're trying to work on self-esteem as like personal trainers, the two that we're going to spend most of our time talking about are body confidence and body image. These are things that we kind of have like an easy effect, not an easy effect on, but like a very tangible effect on. And so body confidence is going to be the belief that an individual can accomplish like physical tasks. So this is very similar to self-efficacy, right? But efficacy is almost a little more like macro, whereas like body confidence is a little more micro. Like body confidence is strictly related to like physical tasks. Like I believe I can catch something, whereas self-efficacy is a little more like, and I know I've kind of been giving a lot of examples that are like catching things, but like self-efficacy is like, I believe that I can reach my goal, or I believe that I can do this overall thing well, it's a very general example versus a very specific example. Body confidence comes down to very specifically physical things, whereas like self-efficacy tends to be, again, kind of the macro. It tends to be like a large version. Do you believe that you can accomplish like most stuff? Are you just good at stuff in general? I love to say that, by the way. That's actually one of my favorite compliments to give people. Is to tell someone that they are good at stuff in general. And it's like a very non-elegant compliment, but it's my favorite one to give, where I'm like, you're just good at stuff in general. And they go, oh, it's like, that's not beautiful, but it is nice. So body confidence, the ability to accomplish physical tasks, right? And body image, how an individual sees themselves physically, like what's their, how they like, do they see themselves as too skinny? Do they see themselves as too overweight? Do they see themselves as short? Right? Like, what are these things that about like how they see themselves? So, body confidence, right, related specifically to the physical realm. Do they believe they could run a mile? Do they believe they could hit a baseball? Do they believe they could jump rope? Right? And this will change with puberty because, like, again, remember, we're going to experience, like, youths are going to experience these growth spurts, and like because of that, they're going to have these weird long limbs that their brain no longer knows how to control. And so somebody could go from being like one of the most athletic, youths ever, to just losing all their confidence and like efficacy, and just believe that they cannot accomplish like certain tasks because they just feel sort of like torn, right? And in body image, right, very different. This is like how they perceive their physical status, right? And so like obviously this can be like their own personal physical appearance, right? That can be part of body image, but it can also just be like how they perceive others feel about their body appearance. So like there's two sections of this, right? Like it's how they see themselves, but also like how they feel about how others see themselves. And that's second one is the one that like sort of leads to these social norms that people get really wrapped up in, right? They might feel too fat, or they might feel too skinny, or they might feel too short or too tall, not fast enough, not strong enough, like whatever, right? All these sort of different things that often lead to some pretty negative emotions. So we're trying to again teach our youths to develop healthier habits when it comes to things like this. We're trying to help them like perform physically better, and like coach them and like encourage them emotionally, and all of that's going to lead to an overall like positive experience, which enhances their overall quality of life. So, summarizing that kind of whole main section up, when we look at emotional well-being, right? Kind of going back to that, it is very much linked to their ability to control things like depression, anxiety, and other psychological disorders, right? We know that like by enhancing self-perception, it will improve emotional well-being. And then we know that emotional well-being, right, is going to come up and be made of it's going to be tied to their social well-being, it's going to be tied to their physical well-being and psychological. So we want to teach our youths how to control their emotions. And now again, like we're not therapists, right? But if we believe that like by getting better at accomplishing physical tasks affects your ability to accomplish emotional and psychological tasks, we do have a positive effect over here, even if it's not our realm. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to be a therapist to make someone feel psychologically better. You can just give them a really great workout and highlight for them all the things that they did in that workout that was awesome. Be like, hey, you really crushed it on this set. That was your fastest time. Hey, your alignment is so much better now than it was when you first started. You are improving by like leaps and strides, like highlighting all that stuff. Somebody's like, really? Like I'm getting better at stuff. It's like, yeah, you are going from being an amateur to something to being good at stuff in general. Like, and so like that again affects like the psychosocial well-being and all these other things. I didn't say psychosocial, but that's your social aspects and psychological. Sorry. How do we actually? So where do we start? If we know that was like the pitch, right? That's the pitch for taking time to think about the psychological aspects of all this stuff. If we understand that's important now, we know that we want to do it now, right? Let's take a look at particularly like how we're going to start. And so this is where we first have to build rapport with our clients. So again, kind of going back to this term that we've seen a bunch of times, rapport is an individual's trust in another, right? So like we want our clients to trust us. And so in order to be able to do that, we need to understand our client, right? Which is sometimes a little bit tough, I'll be honest, like, you know, I think that this can sometimes be challenging with youth. This is why I don't particularly do a lot of like youth training. Like I'll do teens, but I think I have sometimes a little bit of a hard time with like little kids, because like it is difficult for me to understand like what is important to them, what their goals are. And like what, and it's just difficult for like me to get a little kid to like trust me when I'm like, you're gonna do this because it's good for you, and they're like, I don't know what good for me means. And it's like, good point. I actually really have not done like a lot of that, just because the few times I had, for a little while, I taught a youth group exercise class. I was teaching a lot of group X, and they were like, do you want to do the kids one? And I was like, not really, but I'm also new here, so I'm going to say yes. That, by the way, is an example of showing that you have low self-esteem. When I was the new guy, so I was like, nobody cares about my opinions. I'm just the new guy, right? Whereas like once you're established, you're like, oh no, I'm valuable to this company. And so like you have a little pushback. but you don't feel that way in the beginning. So how do we build rapport with kids? How do we build rapport with our youth? Well, typically one of the things you're going to focus on primarily, and this, by the way, is totally true of teens as well, just focus on short-term intermediate change. um, the one thing that I like definitely have experienced with like teens in particular, youths are crazy focused on right now. Maybe you can get them to focus on over here. But if like over here is 1 year down the road, they can get to about here. Like it's very difficult, you know? Um, so when we understand, if we understand that, that's great, because now, like, if we're trying to get our youth to like create goals, and we're trying to motivate them by, telling them like what they're going to be, accomplishing in this timeline, we can incorporate activities that are actually important to our clients, which is really huge there, right? We're going to spend time incorporating activities that are important to them. If like if it's the middle of basketball season and the most important thing in the world right now is basketball, and basketball season's over in 6 weeks, doesn't matter. The most important thing in the world is the next 6 weeks of basketball, right? Like, so we need to be able to like help our clients like, all right, well, let's establish this and let's get good at this next like 6 week period, and then we can focus on another short-term goal later, you know? And so like a lot of times it'll maybe last like, and that's shorter than a season, but sometimes like we need to get it to last, we do need to get it to last a whole season. So another thing we need to do is also acknowledge and address any of their fears or anxieties, but also their boredoms. So this is kind of an interesting one, but when you're working with teens, and I think that sometimes like I have this habit of with my adults too. You guys have probably seen me do this like in lecture version, where I'm like, all right, here's what we're doing today. And then I go, and I know that's not everybody's favorite thing, but it's important because it's going to do right? Like that's sort of like an example of like managing your clients' like expectations, and managing like addressing any of their ideas of like boredom, right? So like not everybody, who knows, you in this class right now, like you may be like, look, I'm never going to train kids. Like I'm just not interested in training teens or youths or whatever. It's just not going to be my thing. But you're still going to get a lot out of this class because like it's an overall program design class. Starting tomorrow, we're going to start paralleling, youth versions and adult versions. And like, we're just going to, you're going to understand program design in general starting tomorrow. So like, that's my message right there of me addressing ahead of time anybody in here who's like, man, I'm just really not that interested in training kids. Like if you have like that kind of opinion, guess what? That's totally fine. Go for it. You know what I mean? We're going to do a senior program design class next mod. Maybe that's what you're interested in. You're like, I got into personal training because I want to help people like my dad. Okay, cool. Awesome. I love that. So you're super interested in the senior stuff. You're going to learn a lot of stuff in the senior stuff that's like really helpful to you. But guess what? We're going to do an athlete mod after that. We're going to do a sports mod. Maybe you're not interested in training athletes, but trust me, you're going to learn some stuff that's really valuable, So that's sort of, we can do the same thing with our youth. Let's go back to like talking about kids here. If we acknowledge and incorporate activities that are important to them, but also address their fears of like, hey, even if you fail this activity right now, we're going to try again until you get it down, right? We're addressing that fear. It's like, guess what? You're not going to walk out of here today feeling as if you don't know how to do this. You're not going to walk out of here today feeling like you failed at this, right? Even if you fail this first set, everybody fails the first set. Exercise is all about, struggling so that your body can adapt. So like, that's going to be a totally normal part of this whole process. But the point of it is so that you overcome it and get better at it. And so we love that. I used to have I did karate for a very, very, very brief period when I was a little kid. I was totally in one of those like little youth karate classes. And I remember the one thing that I remember from it, other than that you got different colored belts for some reason. The one thing that I remember about it is that I guess he'd be a sensei, uh, like sat me down and said, what was it? Oh man, I gotta remember. I'm trying to remember like specifically the quote. But he's like, we like making mistakes because mistakes are how we figure out how to do things right. And I totally took that in the most literal sense ever. And for like a few weeks after that, just did things really in a weird, super weird way. And my parents were like, "Why are you doing it that way?" And I was like, "Oh, because it's the wrong way." They're like, "Why are you doing something the wrong way on purpose?" And it's like, so that I can figure out how to do it the right way. My karate teacher told me to. um, and as silly as like that is, because that's how literal I was as a child, it is still like a really helpful life lesson that has actually kind of stuck with me forever, right? Like there really is nothing wrong with failure. Because it gives you an opportunity to kind of figure out how to do things the right way. And so again, like just helping kids like acknowledge that and understand that it's tough, but it is one of our main goals, right? And then helping them understand the benefits, like trying to do a little bit of forecasting. Again, youth's ability to actually forecast and see pretty far into the future is limited, but try to help them understand like the benefits of whatever activity it is you are engaging in, right? Like, hey, we're doing this and it's going to do this for you. And they go, okay, right? Like they can kind of get on board with that. That's one of the best ways, again, to kind of build rapport with your client, which is really what we're looking for here. So one of the biggest things you also need to do is emphasize like a commitment while also like building trust with your client, right? So like when we say emphasizing commitment, right, we are kind of helping our youth client understand that like this is a working relationship where like you are basically there to help them with whatever they want, at least related to the physical realm. And so like, hey, like remember, like I'm a tool in your tool belt on like your path to building something that you want, like accomplishing whatever it is. Like you work for your clients, right? Like that's how this relationship works. And youths don't really have like an understanding of like that full relationship. But if you can help them understand that, like, look, we are committed to each other. You give me 100%, I'll give you 110% back. You give me 90%, I can't give you anything. You know what I mean? Like it's a very all or nothing process. Like we got to be committed to this. That's great. Like kids actually respond to that really well. When you like allow them to sort of take a little more responsibility, they really respond in like really positive ways. And what that can do is like by you being the person who's like, you're going to accomplish this. I'm here to help guide you, but it's your job to do all the work. That gives them a sense of ownership over things, which helps again build really what's the most important thing about rapport, which is trust. They're like, oh, this person trusts me, to be able to do this. And so that's huge, right? Like, kids really do respond really well to having like more responsibility. I remember, like, I'm sure everybody has some version of this in their life at some point, but like, where you might remember like your parents started asking you to do this one specific thing that was like your job from now on in like the house. Like I love stuff like that. like I mean, I always had like chores list, like my parents never gave me an allowance. But my mom did put like a little piece of line paper with like a monetary value for like specific chores. And so like doing the dishes was worth a quarter. So I could earn like 25 cents by doing the dishes after dinner and stuff. And so like by the end of the week, it'd be like my mom would like tally it all up and be like, "You're in $14 this week." And I'd be like, "Awesome, going to the movies, deuces," and not doing the dishes tonight, you know. um, and so like that was great though. Like the more like, but I remember specifically because we had so many animals because we had the pet store and stuff. The first time my parents like got me like my own cat, and it was like, "This is your cat. Like we are not feeding it, we are not watering it, we are not changing its litter box. Like this is 100% your responsibility." And that was great. Like I was like, my parents like putting that trust in me, only strengthened like my connection to my parents in a way, you know what I mean? Because I was like, oh, they love me, but they also like trust me, and that was a big deal. So putting that into your youths as well, and just like showing, like you'd be like, "Hey, you have to do your homework. We're not going to meet again until Monday. You need to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to let your parents know and they're gonna like give you this activity, they're gonna have it for you and stuff in case you need to reference it. But you can always email me, right? You can always get in touch. But like, I want you to do X, Y, and Z before we meet again on Monday. Sound good? And it's like you give them like an assignment to do from a place of like that you trust that they can do it. That's big. Teens, like I said, that's what I have most of the experience working with, and they responded really well to that. It is weird to me, and I've never said this to one of my teenagers, but it is weird to me that like they love homework. That sounds very odd because I remember hating homework, but I loved homework that was like meant to actually improve me, and that's like a classic example, right? So here's where we can actually start to do this. So how do we figure out what's important to our clients? We are gonna like, if we know that like we need to emphasize commitment and build trust, what things are important to our teens, right? Or how do we define it, right? Because a lot of times you're like, what do you want to do? And it's like, I want to look better. I need more information, like, so how do we guide them? How do we guide them to that more information? This is where we have sort of a five-step process here. So vision, strategy, belief, persistence, and learning. And these are going to sound somewhat similar to some of the things we talked about in our last behavior change class. But this is, like I said earlier, this is that 5-step process that I think is really awesome, that is not present in any other NASA materials. And I think that this one is helpful, not just for teens, but this is like the dummy-proof guide to getting clear goals out of your client. That's really what this is. And it really does kind of apply to anybody, but it's important for teens because often teens just don't communicate as effectively. So vision, help your client identify specifically what it is they want, right? Like, what are they trying to accomplish? And when you're doing this, when you are trying to like, sort of like probe for information and sort of like test the waters and be like, what's important, ask them questions like, what's important to you, what is it that you want? They're like, I want to look better. And it's like, okay, well, what's your definition of working better? Like, I need to understand like specifically what you mean by that. So when you're working with them, you do also want to kind of guide them towards like short-term immediate interest. So what you don't want to spend a lot of your time doing is being like, hey, I'm trying to clarify your goals here. Where do you see yourself in like 5 years, right? Again, like kind of classically, that stupid interview question, right? That's just not going to be effective for like a youth, right? Because they're like, I don't know, hopefully still alive, I guess. That's like a very ineffective like our archetype of question. So help your client identify and get really clear about like what it is they want, and ask them why. Like that's also really important as well. Like getting the why behind things is huge, and focus on the short term because again, youths do not have the greatest ability to like forecast. Now, when we're getting this right, like I said, short-term focus, and then what you want to focus on are their immediate interests. Like, what are they interested in, like immediately, and how do you translate what they're interested in into like fitness-related goals, right? Like, if they say that they're like, well, I want to make the basketball team next year. Oh my God, that's a great freaking goal. You know what I mean? Like that's so easy and tangible for somebody like us. We're like, awesome. So let's sit down. What do you struggle the most with? You want to make the basketball team? What do you struggle with? Like, do you struggle with the cardio, the shooting, the defense, like footwork? Like, what is it? And it's like, oh man, like I'm a really bad shot, and I get really tired really easily. It's like, okay, so you and I are gonna work on like developing your endurance, and we're gonna try to make you more efficient while you're running, and that way you can save some energy. So like you're gonna have more like endurance, but you're also gonna like not burn as much energy quickly. So you'll have an even bigger pool to pull from, while also having the benefit of like not using that pool as frequently. And they go, okay, that sounds exciting. I'm on board with that, right? And it's like, and then, we're going to try to work on your shot. Now, if somebody like me tried to help somebody with their basketball shot, it's funny. I'm a terrible shot. Like, because I just didn't play basketball after like a certain point. Like, I'm sure like, 8th grade on the basketball team, me could kick my butt as a full-grown adult today. I'm positive. I mean, like, I can outrun the kid, you know what I mean? But like, he knows how to play basketball still. Last time I went to play like horse, I'm pretty sure like I was knocked out in 5 shots. Wait, 8 shots? Yeah, 5 shots. Um, so if we're gonna, but like it doesn't mean that somebody like me couldn't still coach somebody to getting better, because I understand like the processes of improving, right? We understand it takes repetition and practice, and you get better at anything. Repetition goes such a long way in the realm of like getting better at stuff. And so like, not a great basketball shot, I could absolutely coach someone to improving their basketball coach shot, 100%, no problem, because we just understand those processes. So, you know, translating that information into like, I want to get better, I want to make the basketball team, into like short-term goals that they can focus on. That's what your vision is, right? You're like, all right, so it's like you're doing like a pitch, right? You're like, so what you're saying is you want to see yourself on the basketball team next year. We're going to get better at shooting. We're going to get better at running. We're going to learn how to break some ankles, right? Like, and they're like, yeah, I'm on board. Let's do this. You know, you're pitching the idea. That's your vision, right? Now you got to come up with a strategy, which I always tend to pivot into a little earlier. Like I don't know if you guys could tell. I was like pulling myself back there. So strategy is my favorite part. This is where you're coming up with a plan to get there, right? And so like, so we are going to practice on shooting on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We're going to develop your cardio every single day, and we're going to do agility-based drills on Tuesdays and Thursdays, right? That's our strategy. The Tuesday, Thursday thing, because agility is important, but it's also something that needs a little bit of rest time, right? And then Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, you're just going to take a few minutes to kind of work on your shot, right? We're going to like focus on, you know, I wouldn't actually do it this way, but like here's a kind of, you know, just to show like strategizing even more deeply. We're going to focus on like 3-point shots on Monday. We're going to focus on layups on Wednesdays. We're going to focus on free throws on Fridays. We're going to get better at all types of shooting. Probably want to incorporate all those things every single workout instead, and just do like 20 minutes or something like that. But again, like that's the strategy, right? We're laying it out for our client like specifically, and they're like, oh my God, like they know exactly what everything's planned out. And it's like, and we guarantee like when they see that, they're going to have this next step, what we're going to see. So specific strategies, right? Set goals that are challenging, time bound. And again, like when you're picking time bound ones, make sure they are near. And also pick actionable goals. So we're looking at SMART goals here when it comes to strategy. We are, again, your SMART goals almost like they're meant to be part of like your idea, you know, but at the same time, like if you write a really good goal, sometimes like it's so concrete and so well laid out, it does the planning for you. A lot of times, like a really well-made SMART goal almost feels like a strategy, even though it's not, right? The next thing we got is the belief, right? And this is where if you've done steps 1 and 2 strong enough, belief will sort of fall into place and happen naturally on its own. But help your client believe not only in their ability to accomplish this task, right, and build up their self-efficacy, but also their belief that they have control over their own behaviors, right? And so when we see this, we want to enhance their confidence and we want to enhance their ability to accomplish tasks, right? They are valuable and they can succeed. Those are the 2 things we're focusing on. They can succeed, that's their efficacy. They are valuable, that's their esteem. So we can enhance that by giving them things to overcome and giving them things to accomplish. Love this, by the way. Used to love doing this with teens. I'd love, because like teens also can like adapt really easily, which is always really nice because it's just like, you know, they're just in a super adapting like biological time. So it's always kind of fun when you train teenagers to just be like, all right, here's your goal. And they're like, how many push-ups? You're like, oh yeah. It's like, how short a time? It's like, oh yeah. They're like, nobody can improve that many push-ups in that short time. It's like, you're gonna. And they're like, oh God. You know, those challenging goals are great because again, The more challenging, the more confidence they're going to get once they accomplish it. But also the more challenging, the more that they're like, well, I better freaking actually do this. Because if I don't, I'm not going to get there. So that's really helpful. That's where we start to, develop our clients' belief, right? We can enhance their belief by giving them things to overcome. We can also, we do want to focus on the fact that like imagery can be really helpful here. Imagery is a great way to enhance that belief through like visualization activities, right? Be like, hey, I want you to imagine like, let's say like let's say they're struggling with their shot, right? And they're like, well, I've just never been really good. I'm a really bad shot. I'm terrible at free throws. I get really nervous, when I get fouled, I have to go to the line, right? And it's like, okay, great. Like those are all like real things. Let's go ahead and think about it though. Like what would happen? Like let's imagine you're on the line and you got to shoot that free throw and you miss. What's the worst case scenario? And that's like the other team gets a rebound and then, picks down the lane and, scores. It's like, all right. And what, is that the end of the world? Right? Did the court fall out from the planet and like, did the whole stadium collapse in and like the world end? It's like, no. It's like, but it feels important to you, right? And it's like, yeah, it does. It's like, okay, great. So it feels important to you, but it wasn't the end of the world. There's going to be a lot of stuff like that in life, right? And that's like part of that, like that visualization, like coming to the realization that it's not the end of the, like every single situation is not the end of the world. That's a big part. That's hard for youths to accomplish. This is why we want to focus on such short-term goals, because everything feels like it's going to be that way forever. I definitely felt that way all the time. I used to feel that way constantly. I'd work for my parents, and I'd be exhausted, and I'd be like worn out for the day, and I'd just be like, I'm just gonna be tired forever. Like I'm never gonna have enough time to do all the things I want. I'm never gonna get to play the games that I want to do. I'm never gonna have fun ever again. My parents would be like, oh, okay, you need a day off, and that would just happen every couple weeks. I would just get like angsty. So giving them, like walking them through and letting them see it's like, so the world didn't end, right? And helping them come to that realization, like, no, the world didn't end. It's like, okay, but what did happen is like still somewhat irritating. They're like, yeah, like I still didn't like it, even though it's not that big a deal. It's like, okay, great. So now we are trying to avoid something that's not a big deal. We're not trying to avoid the end of the world. And they're like, right. Okay. And then that right there is enough sometimes. Okay, walk through it again. And all of a sudden they just see this like vast improvement because all the pressure's off. They're like, yeah, it's still important to me, but it's not the end of the world. And so all of a sudden, boom, great shot. Comes out of nowhere. And it's literally just because some of the pressure was taken off. The stakes were still high, right? They still could have failed, but they feel much more confident about it because they walked through visually, they imagined themselves in that scenario and pulled away all the scary stuff, right? And that's what we're seeing here. Envision your means, not your ends, right? You want to envision how you're going to do something rather than like just what the overall outcome is. And then make sure that you are not visualizing poor technique. This is what's really frustrating. But you can read more about it. If you go back to our day on imagery, remember we want to walk through doing the activity. We want to walk through doing it incorrectly with people around us and like seeing our failure. And then we want to see that breaks down the barrier and says like, okay, so people don't care, right? It wasn't that big a deal. And then we want to visualize it again at the end, one more time where we do it perfectly, right? So we do it in front of people and we do it perfectly. With youths, we don't want to do that. Don't visualize poor technique. When it comes to youths, like again, they've only got kind of a limited capacity for like specific like visualization techniques. So if you spend too much time like visualizing the bad stuff, what'll end up happening. It's not like their brains are more likely to, it's like, oh, I visualized the bad stuff and then all of a sudden they just can't shoot properly. It's not like it does that. It's honestly more about just time. You spend your time like doing the poor stuff, you're not going to have time to do the important stuff, which is the visualize doing it perfectly. And you're not going to get those time. You're not going to have time to do the neural pathway work. Um, and with youths, because sometimes that imagination bit can be challenging, do it with physical practice. Do it while you are physically actually performing in the actual activity. And then lastly, encourage your client to visualize every day. Um, Create that healthy obsession that we've talked about, right? Obsessed often means, kind of has a negative connotation, but getting your youth to be like, all right, every day you're going to wake up and one of the first things that you think about is to, I'm going to improve my basketball shot today. At some point today's workout, I'm going to do this. It's so funny, like being on a call with like all adults, because like it's like this basketball thing just is so unimportant. But that is just not true to your youth. Like it's the most important thing, you know? We're all over here like, all right, we believe that we can get a new job and make lots of money and be very successful and well, and take care of our parents, like do all these things that are like important to us, which are like long-term goals, but your youths, the short term, that's what's super important. So persistence is the next one, right? We do want to have a persistent, ongoing belief to accomplish a task. This is where we are pivoting into, like I said, healthy obsessions, right? Encourage your client to participate in daily exercise. I mean, obviously that's important in general. We know we want youth to be active at least an hour a day. We also want to we also want to develop the persistence. How are we going to do that? We're going to reward their successes and we're going to forgive their feedbacks. That is going to enhance that persistence and give them a reason to keep coming back. A lot, like that's an example of like positive and negative feedback simultaneously, right? Positive feedback, we are reinforcing positive behaviors, and they're like, all right, I did this thing and I got a reward for it. I'm going to do this thing more often, right? Like that's positive feedback. But at the same time, like forgiving the setbacks and being like, hey, like it's all right. Like, yeah, we failed. Yeah, we struggled. We're just going to get right back on that horse and try again, right? We are removing that negative connotation. And that's going to also enhance targeted behaviors, right? We're taking again, best example of negative feedback is the beeping in your car, and then you put the seatbelt on, right? If we just removed, it's like, hey, yeah, like, look, you struggled, you failed, you fell, that's all right. And then you remove that pressure by being like, but we're going to try again. What we're definitely not going to do is give up right now. That's the only thing you're not allowed to do. You are totally allowed to fail again. You are not allowed to give up. Right? And so we remove that like negative, and it's like you show them that you're still there and like being supportive. That's why I like negative reinforcement, which always surprises people. Like when they hear, they're like, you don't like positive reinforcement? And it's like, no, I love positive reinforcement. But I think negative reinforcement is also a really great tool. Like by removing something that is like a barrier and that enhances someone's target behaviors, that's great. I'm not a fan of punishment. That's not the one that I'm a fan, that I don't like. And I think a lot of people think that negative reinforcement and punishment are the same thing. We just know that that's not true, right? So that's how we're going to enhance persistence, right? We are going to reward success and forgive our setbacks. So how are we going to like actually do all that? Well, this is where we want to have like a support network. Remember going all the way back to the top of our PowerPoint here? Remember we talked about it earlier? Social well-being, right? Healthy relationships, right? That enhances persistence. Maggie, I'm going to use you as an example just because I know your working out style. You go to your boxing all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you do that for reasons of like, there's definitely, you've got to be motivated by like personal reasons where you're just like, I like it because I feel better, right? Surely
Yeah.
that's a huge part. But do you also like, do you ever get to like tutor other people in there and like, engage with all of your friends that you've made,
Oh yeah. All right.
right?
I mean, I've been there 8 years. I know everyone in there. So, there's a lot of times where I'm coaching and I'm also like, conversing with other people. So,
Yeah, that's huge. And so it enhances your persistence. Like,
Mhm.
it makes it happen for you. Even on days where I'm sure, there's got to be some days where you wake up and you're just like, no, but
Usually
Jim,
usually those days end up being my best days. So
right?
at the
Oh,
last minute, I'm like, okay, I'll go. And then it's like a great day. So
that's so funny. I feel the same way about bad workout days. When I wake up sore and I'm like, I don't want to go. My legs hurt. I actually find that those workouts are like my best workouts.
yeah.
Um, or like one of the best pieces of advice that I read, I think it was I read it in a magazine at one point, which is so funny because you never want to get advice from magazines. Uh, but I one of the best pieces of advice I ever had was like, hey, what do you do if you got a bad night's sleep and you're supposed to work out in the gym in the morning? Should you sleep in and get your 8 hours, or should you just tough it out and go to the gym? And the answer was surprisingly like get your 8 hours, because what will happen is you'll have more energy, and then later on in the day you'll probably carve out time to go to the gym. And I've found that those are my best workouts, the ones where I'm like, I can't right now and that sucks, but like I'm actually gonna have one of those today, because yesterday was Labor Day and everything got all screwed up, and so like I did not get a lot of sleep. So I'm definitely like, I missed my early morning workout, and it's gonna happen tonight at the PM. um and that's totally like, that's, if we tie this to the idea of like persistence, right? There's a social aspect to persistence, right? Like Maggie, you're full in that for sure, because you got to be there, you got to be a team leader, and so your youths, right? We're not necessarily just there trying to like get them motivated by being like, you gotta lead the team or anything like that. But we are creating like social aspects of this persistence, by us just being their like trainer and being there as their appointment. We are a support system that helps them achieve their goals. They are excited, and they feel committed. It's like, I'm here for you. You got to show up. And they're like, you're right. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I don't want to. And it's like, I know you don't want to. And that's actually okay. I don't need somebody who wants to. I just need somebody who's willing to do some of the work right now. And that'll get you a long way. Um, there's something to be just there's just something magical about repetition. I don't This is such a classic example of this. Like I've told you guys this a million times how I'm a big fan of meditation, even though I don't practice meditation. I'm like a firm believer in it. I think that I have sort of developed my own version, which is to go off for a run and be with my thoughts. That is my meditation. Um, but like the idea of like just sitting down in a quiet place and like thinking, like for yourself, that's so good for you. So anyway, that's a parallel of another way that I feel. Um, I also am not personally like a huge believer that positive thought does anything to the universe, but I am a huge believer in that positive thoughts are crazy important. Because I think that you start to make little micro actions that we are just not very good at noticing. And that's great. And I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying anybody else is wrong. Um, you know, but I am saying that like everybody can benefit from positive thinking. That's an opinion that I can say, and it's not controversial. So that's a good way to like enhance your persistence. I'll explain that I used to explain it to my teens all the time. They'd show up and I'd be like, hey, you seem really down today. And it's like, yeah, they just like don't want to talk. It's like, all right, cool. We're gonna do this and we're just gonna be quiet today. But like you're gonna start feeling better in a little bit. And they're like, I'm mad now though. It's like, that's fine. You're gonna feel better in a little bit. Like, and by the way, annoying. Like, I've been called annoying, and that's an okay thing to be called. And then, sure enough, like 20 minutes in, you just can't help but feel better once you start exercising. It's just a fact of our biology, you know. So persistence is huge. That's the end of what I'm saying. Because it's like your belief is like, I can do this, right? Like it's like the belief step is like, I can do this, I'm gonna succeed. And then persistence is like, no, I can't. This sucks. Oh wait, yes, I can. Back to persistence. Oh, nope. adversity, I'm out, I can't succeed, right? Like persistence is like beating through those irrational beliefs, right? The setbacks. And lastly, learning. And this one's actually, again, I think everybody has already seen this. But teach your clients to self-monitor. Youths, yeah, good luck getting them to do a food journal. But just teaching them to have like develop awareness, that is very helpful. So record their progress and their setbacks. You can do a lot of that recording for them. Again, this is important for everybody. This is totally not a youth thing. But just always like record progress, record setbacks, right? Be like, hey, you did struggle, but remember, we also like missed this workout here. It's like, did you notice that there's a direct correlation between like the 3 appointments that you missed here and your least amount of progress that we've seen here? There's a connection, right? Versus like the month before where like you were really consistent and we saw like great improvements. Helping your clients like sort of see the data and experience that is huge because it can also help them do the same thing that we do with everybody when it comes to recording, which is make course corrections. Be like, crap, I thought that missing that workout wouldn't be a big deal. All right, well, bummer, it was. Now we got to get back on the horse and we got to get there, right? Also, like when you're like recording things, start rewarding their successes. That's huge. So record their progress and their setbacks and reward their successes. Like when they do something awesome, write it down and be like, you see this freaking PR? That's a big deal. Nice freaking work. I do this just really quickly. I do this for myself, by the way, in my workout journals all the time. For those of you who are using workout journals, do something that like gives you a feeling of accomplishment. For me, whenever I just do like on a specific routine, whenever a weight on an exercise goes up, I just circle that. I put lines around the box that I wrote that number in. And that's like, hey, this is the number that I use from now on this lift. But it's also like there to show me like, I'm trying to get as many black boxes as possible by the end of my 6-week routine or my 4-week routine or whatever it happens to be. And that's fun. That's really exciting and awesome and motivating. So the big thing we need to remember, mind and body are linked, right? We know that like changes in one will lead to changes in the other. Your psychological well-being, physical, social, and emotional, all of those things are related to your overall quality of life, which again, that's our job. We're not trying to make a super athlete. We're trying to improve someone's quality of life. If somebody's got pain and they come to you, you're trying to improve their quality of life. If somebody wants to lose 10 pounds to fit into a wedding dress, you're trying to improve their overall quality of life. If somebody wants to increase their coordination to get better at sports, you're trying to improve their overall quality of life. And it seems like sports are unimportant, but it doesn't matter, right? Our job is to make people's lives better. That's what we are enhancing. So part of that is going to be enhancing your students, your youth's self-perception, right? And that's going to be made of their confidence and how they see themselves and whether they see themselves as valuable or not. Right? That's confidence and value. And then value, the two ones that we sort of have a lot of control over are body competence, coordination, and body image, like how they look. In order to be able to do any of that, we have to be able to build a good rapport. And so we have our 5-step process for that: vision, strategy, belief, persistence, and learning. Man, they really went to town on these summary slides. Look at this. 4 slides. That's a lot. And I know it was a little brief, but this is the last sort of preamble to the rest of this course where we get into like the fitness assessments and stuff. So we are going to get into the designing in the program design class starting on day 3. But for now, do you guys have any questions about anything we went over? I feel like I saw somebody come off mute for a second. No? All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and kill today's recording, and I'll see all you all tomorrow.